everybody. Welcome back to another new episode of Unfinished Business Television. Uh, Today, we're going to be doing some movie reviews. I am your host, Unfinished B2 or Projector J1 on social media. And with me, as always, is my co host, Andre Joseph of AJ Epics Productions.
In the honor of the recently departed Gene Hackman, ask him if he ever picked his feet at Poughkeepsie.
Yes, an unfortunate great loss, Gene Hackman. We will be honoring him today by talking about more current releases in the art form that he chose of cinema. So, first things first, the movie we're going to start off with is one of the oldest because we kind of forgot to review it around the time it came out. We're going to be talking about Abigail first. This is a movie by Radio Silence, the directors of Scream 5 and 6, and also Ready or Not. This film is kind of a reunion for them with Melissa Barrera, and it revolves around a group of, I guess you could say, career criminals who are brought together for this one job to kidnap a little girl and hold her, I guess, throughout the night for ransom until the father complies with their demands. And of course, I mean, the trailer pretty much gives it away. So, spoiler alert, the little girl's a vampire, and they have to, I guess, kind of gang up to survive or contain. And it's like a full cast. It has Dan Stevens, Alicia Ware as the little girl, Catherine Newton, Kevin Durant, the late Angus Cloud, Giancarlo Esposito, and kind of a cameo, if you know character actors, at the end. Now, I did not see this in theaters, but I am a big fan of Radio Silence in their movies, except for Scream 5. I had to say, I got out of this film exactly what I expected. It kind of reminds you of it's a studio comedy, but more of an independent kind of film where, you have this high concept idea and you have these groups of characters, pretty much from the first act, who most likely will survive, who won't. Come on. Melissa Barrera is kind of the biggest, I guess, name you could say in the beginning of the film. And it does have kind of that feeling of, was it that home invasion thriller with the blind man, Stephen Lang?
Oh, yes. Don't Breathe.
Yeah, it has that kind of feel. Only here it feels like there's a little more comedy and room for comedy. And this one is just as violent. Like I said, I liked it. I got out of it what I expected. It kind of has a Ready or Not vibe of that horror comedy and, extreme violence. For me, I liked it. Andre, what did you think of Abigail?
And it was just okay. It was pretty violent, and the characters that are trying to do this whole heist and steal the girl, I didn't remember really hating anybody, not even Dan Stevens. Yeah, he ends up becoming like the big bad at the end, but it seemed like even when he knew what was coming to him, he still seemed like he was in regret for what he was about to do. So, there wasn't anybody I could look at and be like, oh, yeah, I want to see that motherfucker get killed. It was pretty straightforward. And, Melissa Barrera, you knew, was obviously going to be the heroine who was going to turn herself around and protecting the girl rather than trying to be a regular accomplice. And pretty much what you see is what you get with Radio Silence. Like you said, the same vibe as Ready or Not, the same kind of like everything's self-contained and there's little twists and turns here and there. So I mildly recommend it. I think it's all right.
I'll give it a recommend because even though it's not as technically as surprising as their past films, at least I felt like there was some invention going on, even with the tired tropes you might come across in this film. I at least felt like there was an energy and a vibe. It's sort of like when you like a band, you're used to their music, but sometimes they can still manage to, you might not love the songs, but there's just a kind of camaraderie and spirit about their work that you feed off of if the material isn't that great. So that's how I felt watching this film. So I mean, I knew I was the perfect audience for this. So it wasn't like, oh no, I don't want to see them do this. And now, was this the movie, their monster movie that they were supposed to do with Melissa Barrera after she got fired off of Scream 7?
No, I don't think so. I think this was shot immediately after Scream 6, and then that movie was supposed to come out after that, and it didn't happen, or it still hasn't been made yet, as far as I know.
Oh, okay. I will say, well, like I always like Kevin Durant in movies. For some odd reason, Dan Stevens and his look, it was pure 1980s and kind of gave me that feeling of like the villain from The Mask, of the Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
It felt like that. But I mean, Giancarlo Esposito kind of has a small but pivotal supporting role. He might have been the only one who I was like, okay, you can kill him. I'm like, but all in all, I think it's an enjoyable film. I think you'll enjoy it as long as you don't take it like too seriously. Like, oh no. And I have to say, Catherine Newton was having a really good year last year between this movie and Lisa Frankenstein, because I remember seeing, what was it, Blockers, with
Yeah.
her and John Cena, and I remember I wasn't that impressed with her in this film. Whereas these last two films, it seems like she's really coming into her own. So I will say I will give it a recommendation. So moving on to our next film, we're going to talk about a documentary that actually aired on CNN, and then strangely you couldn't find it anywhere, and now it's available on streaming. Luther, Never Too Much, which is directed by Dawn Porter, and it's basically a documentary about the life and career of Luther Vandross. I really enjoyed this because I admit I of course knew who Luther Vandross was, but I will admit I wasn't like knowledgeable about his music, or I mean I knew he had sung with David Bowie, and I knew some of the songs, and I really came into him with Dance with My Father Again, that song. So just watching this and going over his career highlights, like his career highs and lows, it was like an eye opener. And it was like, it's a documentary. It doesn't, I wouldn't say it bothers bad mouthing him, because it seems like a whole celebration of who he was and his career. And, sometimes you get documentaries where it's like, oh, he was great, but he was cheap. Or, oh, he was a womanizer. Or he was a freak. And this is like, everybody seemed to have nothing but good, positive things to say to him. And I admire that in his career, he had to work to get to where he was. It wasn't like he was an overnight success. So, I mean, if I think if you're even if you're a fan of Luther Vandross and you know all about his career, I think this is still a documentary you should see. Just kind of celebrate him, his career, and his memory. What did you think of Luther? Never Too Much.
I was very emotional watching it because my whole family has grown up on Luther Vandross for decades. My mom, my aunt, my grandmother, we all listened to his music at home, in the car. And weirdly enough, my introduction to him was actually not a single song, even though I would always hear stuff on the radio and not know it was him. It was actually when he was in Meteor Man, of all
I was
movies.
gonna say,
Yeah. See, like this guy hanging out with Frank Gorshin as one of his henchmen. He doesn't even say anything. He just has to look like his album covers, just look very serious. But yeah, I love the fact that this was such a deep dive into the early part of his career. They got into his personal life, obviously the fact that he was in the closet, mentioning that the song Any Love was like the closest to being biographical. And honestly, that's like my favorite Luther Vandross song of all time out of anything he's ever done. And I love that they got like Marcus Miller and Nat Adderley Jr. interviewed, like the guys that were instrumental in the sound. So they really got into every facet of his artistry, his songs, his legacy. And yes, even the personal things that he dealt with, like his weight issues and, like I said, the lack of a love life that he had. And only thing I think I would probably say was a criticism for me was the whole story about the car accident in '86, because they didn't really deep dive too much into it. There's a lot more to that story that they didn't get into about the kid from Star Search that he mentored and was like recording his first album. Then there was an accident the day they finished the album and they just kind of like buried it afterwards. I think maybe for legal reasons they couldn't get too far into that part of the story. They only just got into like the aftermath of the crash and the weight issue and he was depressed. So I that's the only thing I wish they could have done a little bit more digging into. But otherwise, I mean, anytime you heard his songs or hearing House is Not a Home during that Dionne Warwick tribute, I mean, I started to get teary-eyed, and even the Jimmy Fox stuff, I can relate to that, wanting to put one of his songs on the phone to a girl like, oh, come over. You should do that more often, this day and age. So this is a high recommendation from you. You can find it if you're a big fan of Luther. Definitely check it out.
Well, you're not the first person who said that they got emotional or cried watching this. I mean, I wish, if anything, I may maybe get to a little bit more of his problems with Clive Davis would have been nice. But
Mm.
I figure that, Clive is probably one of the producers of this. So I was like, no, everything was copacetic. And I mean, it's like a little bit of trivia. I wish they would have mentioned like he did the kind of the theme for House Party, the opening scene that baby. I would have liked them to mention that, but let that be a trivia item. I
They also, by the way, I just so sorry to interrupt, but so they mentioned like his collaborations with Roberta Flack, but they didn't mention he wrote a lot of the songs for Busting Loose's soundtrack with her.
Oh man, see, and viewers know I am a big fan of the Bustin' Loose soundtrack. So definitely a high recommendation. So far, we're getting through all these movies good. And then we come to Gladiator II, the sequel to the Oscar Award winning Gladiator, directed by Ridley Scott, starring Paul Mescal as that little kid from the Gladiator who was Maximus's son, now all grown up and turning his back on his lineage and then kind of having to come back to the same court system that he, I guess, left behind. But kind of similarly, like Maximus, kind of has an ethnic bride who gets killed and then he's sold into slavery and then almost relives his father's life. Only this time, his mother's trying to save him and Pedro Pascal is her lover and general. And then you have Denzel Washington, who's just hamming it up. And I hate to say it, I found the political stuff more interesting than the battle scenes in this movie because I felt like the battle scene, it was like, it was sort of like the Running Man, like, let's one up the last one by doing this. Let's one up that by doing it. But it was so like it just wasn't interesting and it felt contrived. And I'm sorry. I mean, I know John Matheson, the cinematographer, has also complained about this with Ridley Scott, but it's like everything is so digital. So you can't really get excited because it's fake. It does. The whole thing of an epic is supposed to make us watch with wonder, not sit there and be like, okay, well, they animated that. Then I might as well be, you might as well have made it a cartoon. And with cartoon, you could have still come up with more interesting visuals. Um, Look, Paul Mescal I think is a talented actor, but he's just not really that memorable in the lead here. And I think it showed because this is more of an ensemble film than it is his movie. And obviously the best performer is Denzel Washington, who just doesn't give a F in this movie and is just, playing and doing what he wants to. But I give it points for the cast, like Joseph Quinn, who, I mean, I guess if he was coming off of Stranger Things, it's nice to be in this big budget movie, but he's not given that much to do. And, the ridiculousness with his insane brother and falling under the influence of Denzel. But other than that, it was pretty much what I expected. I wasn't excited to hear the sequel was coming out, and I just thought watching it was like, meh, it's something interesting to put on, but didn't really, it didn't really capture that much of my interest. And I'm happy I didn't go see it in theaters because I know I couldn't say I would be disappointed, but it would just be like, I knew this was gonna happen. How did you feel about Gladiator 2? I know you were maybe a little bit more excited than I was to
Oh,
see it.
um, people have been bugging me about if I seen it or not, so I can finally say I did, and I felt it was pointless to make. Paul Mescal has no charisma as a leading man. I'm sure he's been good in better things, but here he's just like a scrawny little shrimp that's trying to take the place of Russell Crowe, and it's just not the same. And doing the whole story that, oh, it's Maximus' son, and then we're basically doing beat by beat the same movie all over again. I didn't find like anything different other than, like you said, trying to step up the battle sequences and make them more crazy with like the apes and the multiple big heavy duty muscular killers that he has to face off with just to stand out. And I just didn't find that exciting at all. Yes, Denzel is the best thing about the movie. I just kind of wish he could do like a actual English accent like he did in For Queen and Country. It's a period movie. Why not? Just mix around with everybody else, dude. You have the talent. I don't know why you have to shy away from that, unless again, paycheck. And Ridley Scott's a pal of his, and obviously he was very close to his brother, so maybe he felt he owed him the favor. But other than that, there wasn't anything groundbreaking about it. I thought the performances were pretty much, on par with the original, but nothing like anything different or better. And I just felt like, why are we doing this? And Ridley Scott, of all people, with the talent and prestige that he has, this is a waste of time for him at his old age when he should be doing better films than doing sequels to this type of stuff. I mean, I would have been fine with him doing the Blade Runner sequel, going, Denis Villeneuve did a very good job with that. But Ridley, either hang it up or just do something else entirely. Stop doing these kind of sequels nobody's asking for. Nobody was screaming for Gladiator 2 after you killed off Russell Crowe. So 2 thumbs down for me.
I'm going to say not recommend also. Well, I've told you, like, for a while I've had a problem with Ridley Scott, where he's making movies like he's a studio filmmaker in his 30s or 40s. And it's like, it would be one thing if these projects were worthwhile, but I'm like, this is what, like at your age, this is the dream project you want to be making? Like House of Gucci, you know, Gladiator 2.
This is why Quentin Tarantino wants to retire. He wants to go out before he starts to become out of touch with the times.
Exactly. Just like he wants, like Ridley, I know it's on his docket, but what is it? But like a Bee Gees movie, like, huh? It's like, why are you look, look, I'm not trying to pigeonhole a director, but if you're known more for like epic sci-fi movies, why are you making like, oh, let me make a true life story, a crime story about Gucci, you know?
In order to do sequels, do a sequel to Black Rain while Michael Douglas is like still under 85.
I was gonna say he's not gonna be riding motorcycles, man. And who's he gonna face off against? Sam Elliott? I'm like, or Ken Watanabe?
He fights Jackie Chan.
No, even Michael Douglas knows better. I'll co-star with Tommy Lee Jones or Morgan Freeman, but not Jackie Chan.
Or for Pierce Brosnan in The Foreigner.
What other jobs did Pierce Brosnan have at the time?
Plenty.
What, being in Netflix comedy with Ellen Barkin and Adam Devine? Exactly. No one was beating down Pierce Brosnan. The only other person I can imagine being like, oh, I'll take that job. Pierce Brosnan versus Liam Neeson. That's about it at this point.
Take all the work you can. That's all it is.
Like, I would have rather in the foreigner, Jackie Chan versus Sean Bean at that point. But I will say, there's only 2 reasons I wanted to see that movie, and it was because Pierce Brosnan added some prestige to the project, and Jackie Chan kind of being a badass for once instead of like, oh, let me play comedic or oh, let me take care of these kids. It's
And that heavy Northern Ireland accent.
well, thank God Jackie Chan did not try that one. It would have been like this movie, all the respectability drowns in one speaking scene. Um, so our next film that we're going to take a look at is A Different Man. This is from director Aaron Samberg or Schomburg, who directed a previous film with the star Adam Pearson. And this film is about a disfigured man who wants to be an actor. And, he's shy. He has a crush on his new neighbor who's friendly with him. And then one day he has an accident, and this kind of therapy to, I guess, slowly, hopefully help his dysfunction accelerate so much that he is totally cured and he literally becomes a different man. He changes his identity, his face looks normal. He kind of gets the girl next door that he's always wanted, and he gets his dream of being an actor. But the problem is that he meets a guy who has a similar disformity that he once had. And this guy's the life of the party. Everybody's attracted to him despite his disability. And it becomes him getting jealous, even though the other guy is, if anything, bigging him up and like volunteering, wanting to be his friend and all that. But he has this jealousy streak that eventually sinks him. And I will say this film is very offbeat. It's not you can't predict what's going to happen throughout the film, but I kind of like it. It felt like one of those comedies of the 60s or 70s or even maybe 80s that's more character based, but kind of has a magical realism in it. And then, of course, it becomes absurd after a while. But you kind of feel for it, Like, I feel like I can't say I didn't see The Apprentice, but I thought Sebastian Stan would more have gotten a nomination for this film rather than that film. And obviously, he was having a good year that year. And he comes across winning. Adam Pearson is amazing in this. And even Renat Reinsef, who was in The Worst Person in the World, barely recognizable. If it wasn't for the name, I wouldn't have known it was the same actress. And she is fine in this film again. And she did well with I guess kind of burying her accent too. Though the only thing that was weird was really the third act and all the things that happened there. That kind of threw me a little off. But I think if you're into kind of dark and weird comedies, like this could have been a Charlie Kaufman movie, almost. And it has one of the best celebrity cameos towards the end of the film that came out of nowhere, really. So I highly recommend this film. I really enjoyed it more than I expected to. Andre, what did you think of A Different Man?
I'm going to say right off the bat, I think Adam Pearson should have been nominated for Best Supporting Actor. I don't know why, because that dude was perfect for what that story was presenting itself to be. The idea that here's the guy that he knows he's deformed, but he doesn't let that limit him. And you could see that seething jealousy in Sebastian Stan, especially when they're out doing karaoke and he's just like absorbing the moment and Stan's just sitting there like he wants to kill this guy. And I thought that's where, honestly, the movie was headed, because there came that point I felt like this was turning into The Substance 2.0. This guy was going to ultimately like turn around and he was going to try to kill Adam Pearson at the end. And he sort of attempts that, but then it has that nice little twist with what happens with him and a certain circumstance that alters his fate. But otherwise, yeah, I thought this was a brilliant film. I didn't even really see it as a comedy. I thought it was more of a character study and one that kind of had its ebbs and flows from him being deformed to then, like, now he's got the perfect face and you're thinking, oh, now he's just gonna, get everything he ever wanted, only to see that, oh yeah, we're gonna do this play based on him. Everybody thinks the actual guy's dead, and then next thing you know, it's like, well, I'll put on this mask and I can really be this guy. I know who he is. And so I think that's all well and good. And I was thankful, by the way, that Adam Pearson and Renee Restet, if that's her name, I was glad they didn't have a love scene because I was worried it was getting to a point where we were going to go a little too far, like especially since we had the scene with her and Sebastian Stan getting together, and she wanted to wear a mask just to see how that felt. So, like, please don't go the other way around. I mean, we already did that Under the Skin movie with Scarlett Johansson. We don't need to see anything more than that. But yeah, this was really, I think, a great story, solid acting all around. A lot of, honestly, this movie should have gotten more accolades for the Oscars. I think it was completely snubbed, not The fucking Apprentice. And yeah, like you, I highly recommend this one.
Yeah, this movie made my top 20. And interestingly enough, it's written, obviously, since the director had worked with Adam Pearson before, he wrote this movie specifically for him. And what I liked was it gives this kind of message that don't judge a book by its cover, because everybody is different underneath it all. Even the scene where he sees like the neighbor who hates him, and then he sees him walking happily in the park with a beautiful woman. Then the next scene we see the neighbor's hung himself. So, just because it seems like, someone has it all doesn't mean you never know what's going on personally in their lives.
Yeah.
So, two high recommendations for that film. And next, we have a film I did see in theaters that I really enjoyed from beginning to end, Strange Darling. Now, this is an interesting story when it comes to this film because I kept seeing the trailer, but I still didn't know really what it was about. But it was one of those trailers that just kept coming and coming and coming. And I really thought the lead female was Bella Thorne every time I saw the trailer. So I was like, oh, she's in it. This looks like, a step up in the film she appears in. And I will admit, the thing that got me into the theater, actor Giovanni Ribisi is the cinematographer for this movie. So he's going in at a new profession. So I went into the film kind of semi-blind. And I love this film. I like that it's non-linear. The story is told, even though it seems like it's linear, it's not. And, I like that. Well, Kyle Gallner, a character actor who's all over the place, finally gets a meaty role as kind of a co-lead in a movie. It has two actors I haven't seen in a while who come out of nowhere in supporting roles: Ed Begley Jr. and Barbara Hershey. I like the surprises it pulls on the audience. I'm trying not to get into spoilers here, but you're not going to see the twist coming. This is one of those films where I want to read the script because I want to know how it's structured in the script versus, what comes across on the screen. Because it has plenty of memorable visuals. And I believe it's shot in 35 millimeter.
Yes.
So
he uses his own equipment.
See, and Giovanni Ribisi, he has a career as a cinematographer because this film is shot very beautiful. Plenty of chase sequences. The storyline's a little wavy, but it's believable. Enough to keep your interest. And I think this is a really big sleeper film that a lot more people hopefully will discover when it maybe is more on streaming. Because I think it's an undiscovered gem. And I think Willa Fitzgerald, oh my God, where did she come from? She gives such a strong and believable performance, and who is not Bella Thorne, and I can't say enough good things about it. This was another film that made my top 20 of last year. Andre, what did you think of it? Because I know you saw it a little bit more recently. And
I liked it. I thought Willa Fitzgerald and Kyle Garner had very good chemistry together, and it's hard. Like I don't want to get into the spoilers because I know where it goes, but what happens in terms of how you think the movie begins and the nonlinear structure kind of throwing you off. I really like that twist that comes about halfway through the picture and subverting those expectations. I think that's what made it worthwhile to me. And yeah, Giovanni Ribisi knocks out the park as a cinematographer. He gives it kind of like a 80s, 70s vibe to the shooting in 35 millimeter. A lot of shots that are very static, not a lot of movement, except when they do like the big chase sequences outdoors. Ed Begley Jr. was good, but I have to say it's hard for me sometimes to believe that he can play an ex hippie because I've always got St. Elsewhere in my head and any other nerdy part he's ever played, Meet the Applegates and Transylvania 9000. Like every time I see this guy, I'm thinking he's like a nerdy scientist or doctor or a nice dad, not a pothead. He's played like different types of parts before, but I have the utmost respect for Ed Begley Jr. He's a big environmentalist, and that too was like something because they had to play with that nonlinear structure. You thought that whole thing with him and Barbara Hershey, what happens with them, plays in an obvious direction, and it doesn't. So yeah, I think that's what plays in its favor. It's a little slow at points. I'll admit that, especially the very last shot in the film. Like, is this gonna keep going? When is this gonna stop? But otherwise, yeah, no, this is a high recommendation for you. I don't think this is really like a horror movie per se. This is really an artistic feat.
Well, I would say if I wouldn't say maybe an Academy Award, but I think definitely Willa Fitzgerald should have been kind of given some recognition at an independent film award show or something because she is very memorable and has a very strong performance. Ed Begley Jr., knowing that he's an environmentalist, maybe that's why I can see him playing a pothead very easily or ex hippie. I mean, come on, Meet the Applegates was about basically being environmentalists, so saving the planet. So, and like you said, the end, yeah, where it goes, yeah, it slows down compared to what we've just seen pretty much throughout, which is almost like extended chase sequences throughout. But again, high recommendation, and I look forward to JT Mulner's next film, who wrote and directed this. Would you say you have a favorite scene in the film?
The scene when Kyle Garner's going through the house and she's hiding in the little mini fridge,
Mm-hmm.
and then he could kind of hear like the subtle sounds before he starts shooting at it, and then that long dialogue scene they have while she's handcuffed.
Okay. So that was Strange Darling. And we come to our final film, which is our newest release, The Monkey, written and directed by Oz Perkins, based on a short story by Stephen King, and starring Theo James, Elijah Wood, and Tatiana Monsley. Now, first off, I will admit I did not read the short story, so I don't know how it differs. I think the ending is different. Um, and also, just for those going to see this in theaters, there is a after credit sequence, but it has nothing to do with the movie. Is so I'll just let you know that. No spoiler. Um, I have kind of a mixed review about this film. And I enjoyed it for what it was. But I also felt like I was watching a Final Destination sequel. you know, because the most noteworthy thing about this film are the death scenes. And it feels like a movie where they want you to kind of root or see how's this death going to happen, and there's nothing wrong with that. But then when you get the story of the film, it's very thin, where it's just like, okay, this monkey was passed down from their father. How did he get it? What happened to their father? you know, and that was my problem with the movie. I mean, I guess if you want to go like, oh, it's reality, you don't know everybody's story, but like it will introduce so much stuff, and then you never know what is going to happen. Like even I guess the kid who bought the monkey at an estate sale, brings it home to his mother and his Marine brother. And then there's this whole like little side story about father leaving, loving to have sex with whores. And he kind of has a flashback, but then that's it.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, what was all that? And then even when they go to his aunt and uncle, we learn that they're swingers. That's it. You know, like, why did that need to be introduced? Was it just there for comedy? And why would a priest? Okay, the character whose funeral they're at is decapitated in a restaurant. But why would a priest curse? It's like just out of nowhere. It wasn't like she was mutilated. So that was weird. And Theo James, I'm not gonna say he's a bad actor, but as you were kind of saying with Paul Pascal, he doesn't really have that much of a presence. So he's not only playing a lead, but he's playing two characters whose only real difference is one is malevolent and dresses like the 1980s, whereas the other one's kind of a bookish nerd. You know, and that's really the only difference between the two of them. And I just felt like if you, since they look similar, if you would have put Justin Theroux in this movie in the lead, maybe it would have been a little bit more interesting. And then put Theo James in Beetlejuice, more as a younger lover for Winona Ryder. I think then maybe we would have gotten everything straight here. Also, I wish they would have used more practical effects in this film. Because I felt like half the time, yeah, these death scenes are great, but I can tell that CGI blood. And again, that's probably more of a nitpick. You know, if you're a film fan, you'll see it. But if you're like a regular viewer, be like, look real enough to me. And also, while I like Elijah Wood, and usually if Elijah Wood's in the film, you know the things are going to get weird. But again, another plot point kind of just dropped. Like, it's there for, okay, so we know this is his last weekend with his son. That's all. That's really the only reason Elijah Wood is, and I guess have a dick measuring contest. Like, I've got enough money, I can take him away from you. And they could have set the rules of the monkey a little bit more straight because, you know, it seems like it's whoever's around or close to them. But like when they kill his boss, why? He's not close to him. So that scene just made sense, except that maybe he just wanted to have a scene where somebody chokes on a vape, you know. But I mean, despite my nitpicks, I think it's an okay film. But I think it's I always want people to go to the movies, but this is something you could probably wait to see. And you know, so I give it a mild recommendation. I mean, if you're into Final Destination or gore, go to see this. But if you're looking for a Stephen King nuanced tale, you're probably going to be a little bit disappointed. Andre, what did you think of The Monkey? And
Well, I have a question for you. So Theo James, when he's a kid, is the kid played by two different young actors, or is it the same kid?
I have no idea. I didn't do the research into that one.
Because I could have sworn it was like two different actors playing the
Maybe.
kid. Yeah, because it was throwing me off that he would play twins as an adult, but then have two different kids who don't even really look like each other when he's growing up with Tatiana Maslany as the mother. So I'm with you on everything you just said. I felt that, first of all, I was laughing where it needed to be like humorous. You know, the death scenes, especially like the moments when he does use the monkey and then the deaths happen off screen and you just cut straight to the funeral. That stuff's hilarious. But there are way too many holes in this film, particularly with how is it that you could destroy the monkey and it just pops back up out of nowhere and usually around the same people. And then, yeah, the father disappearing. We don't know what the hell happened to Elijah Wood. He just has that one scene and that's it. I thought maybe he was going to be in the post-credit scene and see him get whacked by the monkey. Um, and it looked like there were two different versions of a certain death involving a family member that kind of threw me off. And so, you know, there's just I think it had me in the beginning, but once you got to the adult scenes, I think that's where you started to lose me a bit. because it started to get a little dull seeing Theo James trying to solve everything and realizing his brother is behind whatever's going on with the monkey in terms of this big revenge plot. And yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say I was like bored to tears and I just didn't like it. I'm with you. I give it a mild recommendation, but it definitely was a movie that this probably could have been a Shudder release. This didn't have to be a theatrical one.
Yeah, I think like as you were saying, or if Theo James can play one brother, I mean, I don't know what happened with the height, but Elijah Wood could have played like the other brother then.
Yeah, that would have made sense.
Or have Elijah Wood play, two roles in the film. I mean, no offense, he's probably more of a get than Theo James is currently. But like I said, I enjoyed it mildly. It's something you can definitely wait to watch at home. But I mean, if you're a horror fanatic, you'll probably love it. But it's sort of like watching a highlight reel. That's the thing you enjoy about it. It's like, oh, I enjoy all the deaths, but then when it comes back down to earth, it's like, eh, So, mild recommendation. And that will do it for this episode of reviews. Obviously, we definitely want you guys to go see Luther, Never Too Much. We want you to see Strange Darling. We want you to see A Different Man. You could probably skip Gladiator II. Abigail, enter at your own risk, and the same with the monkey. But we have plenty of unfinished business to attend to. But before we go, have you seen After Sun? If not, why not? Because it's fucking awesome. Andre, what movie would you recommend to people?
Have you seen the movie In the Shadow of the Moon? If not, why not? Because it is fucking awesome.
And with that, we bid you adieu. Now go away until the next episode. And
if you like this review, please be sure to like and hit subscribe to be alerted to new episodes in the future.